Hello and welcome to our home. We are doing something a bit different today. We're doing a family discussions episode. We've got the 3 camera angles going. We've got one there. Got one round here and we've got a bit of a funky one up there. So I'm joined today, for any new listeners, by Jessie.
Yeah.
You want to say hello?
Hello.
Lindsay, hi.
And George. Hi, everybody.
Lindsay and George are my parents, if you don't know, and Jessie is my girlfriend. No, I'm kidding. Jessie is my wife of 2 weeks. 2 weeks and 2 days.
Wow, babe, that's really long.
It's been a long time, yeah. So obviously we are super experienced in marriage and want to impart our wisdom onto everyone today. No, we're kidding.
Yeah, this is our TED Talk.
Go for it. Go for it.
No, we're kidding. It's obviously got 2 married couples at the table. We've got a couple that's been married for how many years?
Oh my goodness.
Quite a lot.
38.
38
Wow,
years.
this year.
Yeah, it's quite a long time. We've been married 2 weeks and 2 days. So quite differing perspectives when it comes to marriage, and obviously with the different ages just with us. We've been exposed to a lot of different things, different cultures, different societies even in terms of what is expected. And yeah, we're going to be bringing that today, and we are talking about marriage roles, but also what collectively we feel is so much more important than marriage roles, which we will get onto later.
Yeah, as we go.
Yeah.
Great.
So I don't know if you've got anything prepared to start with. You jumping in?
No, that was your job.
Am I starting?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you were talking about actually how there are quite a lot of similarities in terms of what's on social media now and to what we experienced like 38 years ago. Not on social media, obviously.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak for what we see on social media now, what me and Jessie have agreed on, what we see, and then you can speak on what you see or what you
we
were
found
brought
in the
up,
church
without
at the
social
time.
media. So, yeah, within the church, actually, to be honest, I haven't heard too much within the church. So I think it'd be good if you talk about your experience in the church.
Yeah.
You
Now
said,
you go first.
you can go first.
Okay,
You said you
yeah.
had a whole seminar or something.
It was like a 3-week, I think it was 3 weeks, but it was like a 3-week marriage series at church. And it was all about submitting to your husband, and it was also about teamwork. They didn't just talk about the women listening to their husbands, but I remember at that point in my faith, which was before meeting you, I don't remember exactly when, but I was kind of awful. I was kind of steering towards I had to submit to my husband, and that was just what you had to do, and they were definitely pushing that agenda, I think, a bit more.
And you said you saw that on Salt. That's what you were hearing at church.
Yeah,
and
so
speaking to
I
men
was on
Salt.
Salt. Guys on Salt were submit to your husband.
I take it there was no mention of him submitting to you as well.
No.
It's just one-sided. Just
No,
clarify.
not
It's also a weird thing to bring up on Salt on a date.
There's some.
It's an odd thing to bring
I
up.
don't even know how you would bring it up in the
I
first
didn't want him
place.
to
That's what I mean.
submit to me.
I just
if
remember
not,
having those
swipe.
conversations and then being well, you'd submit to me, but I'd only expect that once you're my wife, though. And I was right, yeah. But at that point, I was kind of at the point where I kind of thought that's what I had to do.
That straight away, I think, just tells you someone's focus is in the wrong place. They're thinking about submission. And true submission doesn't come when you're thinking about submission or wanting submission. That's not how submission, with the way I'm going to say it too much today, comes about. But yeah, it's just, I feel like your head and your heart's all in the wrong place if you're bringing it up that quick. You're so pressed about it.
Yeah.
So bothered about
Yes,
it.
I never met these people.
Yeah. Weird.
Purely online conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, the 3-week thing was, they'd get these married couples come up, but I don't feel like it was anything other than wives submit to your husbands, husbands love your wives, work as a team. But the team wasn't the focus, it was about submission, and they'd make jokes and they're oh, ha ha ha. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And we
The
heard
condescending jokes.
Well, we heard that recently at this church in Spain.
Yeah.
It was so.
Yeah.
I thought can't even remember the jokes exactly, but it was so. It seemed like such satire that I was waiting for the punchline for about 5 minutes, and then eventually I was like, oh wait, he's being
He
serious.
even leant over and
This-
was like, is he being
I was like,
satire?
yeah, I think I
Satire?
asked you. I was
Yeah.
like, is this satire?
And I
So
was
I
like, I don't know.
is this, where's the joke coming? I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And I was like, oh, actually,
Yeah.
he believes this stuff.
Yeah.
It's not a joke.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really funny because you're talking about that, and even before I met Mum, right? Because I was in the US is where I started a lot of my church journey, and there, whenever any kind of marriage relationship was brought up, submission for women, the jokes automatically started coming right away. Oh, when I marry you, you'll have to submit to me, and you'll have to do this, and you know, and the women are like, ha ha ha. But it's really funny. No one ever spoke of the other side, you know, of husbands actually, oh, you're going to have to love me, you know, when we get married. The submission seems to have a stigma around it, you know, that almost invades everything when you start talking about marriage relationship and roles within the marriage. Submission just seems to absorb everything.
Yeah, it was the same. The same for me as well. First church I went into. To be fair, I have heard a lot of sermons in conservative traditional churches also explaining what it means for the husband to love his wife, and therefore, you know, if the husband is loving his wife as Christ loved the church, then it's no problem or shouldn't be a problem for her to be able to submit to that because he's got her best interests. But I think the thing that really bothered me was when you look at the very first, it's actually Ephesians 5 verse 21, first verse, which is like not related to what's gone before and is like the sermon headline, if you like, or the main point, which is then expanded on, is submit to one another out of reverence for Christ.
Yeah.
That is what you're called to do. Then it says wives to your husband. The verb isn't even there. Wives to your husband as to the Lord. Husbands, love your wives. Love your wives like you love your own body. Love your wives like Christ laid down his life for the church, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, it was crazy that was not... I had to like do research and find that written in books and through scholars and all the rest of it to find that was actually the truth. And mutual submission is a very different thing, isn't it? And how that works.
And I have to say, I never actually heard the concept of mutual submission. It was always very clear cut. Wives, submit to your husbands.
Yeah.
Husbands, love your wives. And that was like the all-encompassing relationship that was to exist within a marriage. So it never even crossed my mind before I met Linz and as I was thinking about a marriage partner, you know, that I would need to submit. As a man, I wouldn't need to submit. That was not a call for me. And yet that passage has been there all the time. Submit to one another.
Out of reverence for Christ.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, that puts a totally different aspect to the relationship right from the very beginning.
There was actually a book that came out, just very quickly, at that time that was called Submission is for Husbands Too. And everyone went, what?
I can imagine that, yeah.
Yeah. Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong on what I'm about to say, as you are the Bible experts.
Not at all. What is he going to say? This is always worrying when you preface something like that, Jordan.
No.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
I think it seems to me like people get, or men and women, but men tend to confuse submission with leadership. And it's always about submitting to my leadership. And like I said before, how people on Salt are saying that to you immediately.
Yeah.
It's just too soon. It's like your head and your heart's in the wrong place. Now, I haven't read all the verses that actually I have read most of them, but I don't remember them because I haven't studied it like you have. But it seems to me that submission and like leadership are getting confused. So in our dynamic, instead of using the word leadership, I'm someone who likes to take the first step.
Take initiative,
I like to take initiative, and I don't want to use the word leadership just because of the negative connotations that it has, and I'm not trying to be like, I'm leading and you're below. It's not that. It's we're equal.
Yeah.
But I like taking the first step, and you like someone who takes the first step.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But submission for us is like, oh, well, I'm quite good at taking the first step, and you prefer maybe not taking the first step. It's a bit more of a challenge, which I also encourage you to take the first step a lot. But naturally, I'm going to assume the role where I take the first step more than Jessie does. And that works for us, but we are both mutually submitted to each other. And I think this is where the confusion comes in between leadership and submission. I am not lording over the fact that Jessie has to follow me, just because naturally Jessie would prefer for me to take the first step, and then she comes along after.
Yeah, you're more of a natural leader. Yeah,
that's the big difference. But too many men, because I think people just want power, don't they? And there's power struggles in everywhere. People are always searching for power, even if they don't realise it. And very much so in a marriage, when the men hear this, they think, oh, my wife should be following me, I should be the leader, and she should be submitting to me. And that's where the focus is, not truly understanding like equal submission and what that looks like, and actually how different roles can look differently. So for example, you and Dad have been very different to me and Jessie. So Mum, you tend to be more the one that will take the first step. You're like the apostle, the entrepreneur. You'll be like, right, let's go. And Dad can be a bit slower and take a bit more time to come around. So I've seen a completely different example. That was the example I grew up with. But you two have learned to submit to each other equally, but your equal submission looks different. Now, are you not submitted to your husband?
No.
But you are both equally submitted to each other. It just looks
again,
different.
it's all about your gifts and your strengths and how that works. So I wouldn't dream of trying to tell Dad what to do when we're trying to buy a car or lots of other things, because his gifts and skills are far greater than mine in that area. But in terms of like new moves in life, like the beginning of a new adventure, I tend to see it first, and I'll come and and I would naturally speaking move much more quickly, hence us deciding that we wanted to move to Spain in March and we were here by July, and George is like, whoa. But over the years he's got used to it. Only happens a few times in our life, a few key times, and he's kind of, I think, trusts me now that when I get that often out of nowhere, it's normally right and it's normally okay. And you're amazing in terms of the speed that you are willing to move after the initial getting over the shock of it, like taking it in. But they're also,
I have a lifetime of experience of resisting at first, and I'm thinking, no, okay, I should have listened.
But by the same token, there have been times, particularly in early years when I was younger, where because when we say apostles, by the way, for those listening, we don't mean the 12 apostles. We mean Ephesians speaks about five base gifts, which we believe everyone has: apostles, pioneers, and entrepreneurs, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists. Is that 5?
Yeah.
Which we think they operate whether you're a Christian or not anyway. But we can go into that later if we want to. But by the same token, there were times when I was moving very quickly, like, oh, we've seen a house, I really want that house, or my heart's in that house, I really want that house. Dad's like, no, I don't feel good about it, Linz. And because he's got kind of a prophetic edge, he's basically, your main gift is teaching, isn't it? But he's got a prophetic edge. So he was like, and he went and was praying about it and got the word cease and desist. And I was like, okay, well, I trust you.
Yeah.
I trust your ability to hear God sometimes, well, I say sometimes, to hear God in a situation like that where the apostles wanted to run and the prophet goes, hang on a minute, I'm not sure that's right. And and you were so right, because I remember that example. There was a reason which showed that house was really not for us.
Well, so we just had to cut because the doorbell rang, and when our dogs hear the doorbell, they think it's the biggest threat you could possibly imagine. So they were trying to alert us. It got very, very loud. So I'm not sure what point we'll have cut out, but
I think I was just saying
they'll
that
probably have heard the beginning of it.
Yeah,
I just want to finish up what you were saying.
I just learned that working, I submitted to your dad in that instance, because I trusted his ability that was from God. You felt quite strongly about it, so I was like, that's fine, we won't buy the house. And it turned out brilliantly. There was a reason why we didn't buy, why we found out it would have been really bad to buy that house. So
and that happened for us just today. We were on a walk and we were talking
you
about
just read my mind. I was going to say that.
Yeah. Well, you can say it if you want.
No, you go. I just meant I was thinking about it.
Yeah. We were talking about how to approach a conversation.
Yeah.
And should we bring this up? Should we leave it? Me being like, oh, I've had this thought, I just want to go and do it immediately, I don't want to wait. Jessie was a bit more cautious, like, oh, I'm not sure, I think we should potentially wait for that. And I was like, Okay, I hear you.
Yeah.
We'll wait.
Yeah.
And I thought that even when we were having that conversation, that you honoured my feelings and thoughts on it as well.
Even though I want to go
You weren't
and
just
take...
like, I'm going to do this. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
were like, what do you think? And I was like,
And I think that's
I
where
don't think
people
it's
can
right.
get submission confused. Christian men, regular men. My wife should be submitted to me. It's we're going to go have this conversation, or I want to have this conversation. What do you think? And you almost can't disagree. If you disagree, then I'll just veto it and go.
Yeah, you're like, well,
We're going to go
I'm
have
ahead
it
of the
anyway.
household.
Yeah.
Or it's the final say. So
Yeah.
I think godly men who follow this principle, they would still say, no, I will take my wife's opinion into account, but I will have the final say as the head, and we need to talk about headship in a minute, because I'm the head of the household, and that is, I think that's the classic view. And we were told when we were first Christians, weren't we? But you can't be a team like that, an equal team, because what if you disagree? Then what are you going to do? And we were like, well, we'll pray about it until one submits to the other and we come to a better decision about what we think God's saying, or maybe it's not as big of a deal to one of us as the other. It doesn't have to be that George automatically has veto rights. That's crazy. But people were not having it. When we were in
People
our
still
early
aren't really
20s,
having
When
it,
I
to be
had
fair.
that,
Oh, really?
When I had
Not
those
in
talks
churches.
at church, they said, I remember this one woman saying like, oh, he has the final say, and if I disagree with it, I'll just pray that God would change his mind. And I was like, well, or you could just talk about it.
Yeah.
Like, they were just like, yeah,
Keep
well,
talking it
you
through.
just have to accept it. And then,
Well, let's
You
just
get
say that
final
we've had
say.
38 years of being married
Careful.
and we have never had a problem making decisions. And it's generally, we've made decisions quite well, actually. We've had other issues in our marriage, but it's not.
Because I mean, we've been talking
much
about
been
quite a
that.
bit, but it didn't always start out that way. Because again, when we had to learn about each other, right, in order to really start finding the place of submission to each other. And this is the one thing, because again, when I met you and when you met me, I think my thinking was actually very much, I'm the head of the household, I am the husband, the wife submits to me. Of course, I love her, but at the end of the day, I'm the one in charge. So you approach the marriage with that, and I know that you were trying really hard as well to be able to fit in within that method of actually relating.
Initially, while I was trying to research whether this was actually true or not.
Yes.
Right or not.
But along the way, you find out what are the things that actually work and not work. Am I actually comfortable being the leader kind of thing, and having responsibility with absolutely everything? Because I think in some circles, that's the definition.
Yeah.
You're the head of the household. You have responsibility for everything. Your wife, your children, the finances, buying homes, bringing in all the money, everything is up to you. You are the spiritual, number two, God, Jesus being number one, you're number two, and the rest of the family is below you, so there's a real hierarchical approach to a marriage,
And I
right?
think from our conversations earlier, you were saying that was actually damaging to your marriage, taking those approaches, because you both viewed each other in a way that wasn't helpful, because you weren't allowing the other person to be who they were made to be, and trying to fit into a box that didn't suit you was just never going to work.
Yeah.
What did you say? Square peg in
Square
a round
peg
hole.
in a round hole.
It just doesn't work. And if you're trying to do that, I mean, you have enough problems in a marriage anyway. If you add that into the mix,
Yeah.
I think
it's
if
going
you
to be a nightmare.
if you have that approach, particularly as the man, as the husband, whatever giftings your wife happens to have, whatever talents, whatever abilities that are greater than yours, that are more mature than yours, because let's face it, a lot of women are much more mature than men, particularly in relationships. When you first get married, I think that is pretty much the truth. I think a lot of men can be very insecure. But if you're approaching the marriage with, I'm the one that's actually in charge and I have the responsibility, it doesn't matter what on earth you have done or whatever the case might be. You might have a very high position in a company because of your ability. You're still subservient to me. You're still submitting to me. I'm the one that actually decides. So I'm not necessarily going to listen fully, right? What I think best is what's going to happen. And I think that is a way that marriages don't last, because it really doesn't honor. That's not loving. That is not submissive. That is not the way that of Christ. And yet we believe that that is the way of Christ. That is the way of God. That is the way that marriage roles are supposed to work.
It's crazy considering, as I said in my talk last week, Jesus has the greatest power and authority in the universe. And if he came and emptied himself, made himself nothing, became the servant of all, washed his disciples' feet, said, you are not greater than your master, you go and do likewise, and gave his whole life for us, why or how people get off on thinking that authority anyway means that you can boss your wife around and tell her what to do is bonkers, because that is not following Jesus' example at all, is it? But I do think it's worth making a quick comment on headship, though. Headship as a term isn't even in the Bible, but there are 2 times when in the New Testament where the Greek word kephali is used in terms of the husband is the head of the wife, and this whole weird thing about head coverings in Corinthians 11, where there's a whole kind of thing of God being the head of Christ and Christ being the head of man and whatever. So that's normally the passage that is referred to, that with this whole husband is the head of the wife and man is the head of woman. They kind of say the both things. But it's really interesting, again, when I looked into this the first time many, many years ago as to what this was all about. And the Greek word kephali if you think about our language, let's take the word sick. Word meanings change all the time, don't they? So sick right now can mean you're ill, but it can also mean, oh, that's great. Just like, oh, wicked can mean brilliant. So it doesn't take many years to realise, if you've got half a brain, that our word usage changes, and that people reading something that has wicked or sick in it in the years to come could easily not understand what it does or doesn't mean. Well, it's the same. You're talking thousands of years here. So in order to understand, if it's a difficult passage and it's something that's causing a lot of controversy, sometimes you do have to dig and go, well, how was that word understood at the time? What is the other literature and the writings in New Testament times when they use the word kephali? What does it mean? And even when they're translating from the Hebrew as well, in terms of a word that means leader, which happens 180 times, just as a little tidbit, only 8 times is the word kephali used. But anyway, that might be confusing. That's probably a more in-depth teaching. Basically, kephali was widely used to mean head, as in head of a river, not boss, authority, spiritual authority, leader. That was extremely rare. And actually the church fathers, like I've got some quotes here, like from, in the 3rd century and whatever, they were categorical. I've got 3 church fathers here who said, like Bishop of Alexandria called Athanasius in 296 said, for the Son is the head, kephali, namely the beginning of all, and God is the head, kephali, namely the beginning of Christ. And other church fathers spoke about how Christ proceeded from the Father. Because actually, once you get into, if you do interpret it as boss and authority, you can come into real problems in terms of hierarchy within the Godhead as well. And that's what some of these church fathers were concerned about and wanted to protect us about. And Archbishop of Alexandria as well, John Chrysotom, said that head, kephali, meant primal cause, source, origin. So, and when you look at the 2 places, both in Ephesians and Corinthians, where this is used, like at the bottom end of the passage in Ephesians, it speaks about one flesh. The husband and the wife will come together as one flesh. So it actually fits really well when you look at the husband being the head of the wife, being the origin and the source of the wife. Not the boss, not the authority, because it's about oneness. It's about one flesh. It's about unity. It's about mutual submission. And in the Corinthians passage as well, it's a similar thing. And at the bottom end of that one, sorry, I'm just trying to find I can't see my notes when I want to see them, and I don't want to get it wrong. Can I look it up?
Yeah, take your time. Take your time. How long do you think it's going to take? Because we didn't fully finish our thing about what we see on social media. It's going to take you a little bit.
Oh, do you want to? Are you saying you wanted to say that now while I'm?
I don't want to interrupt if you're going to be quick, but we didn't quite finish off what we're going to say. I think it's quite clear the views that you've experienced in church, very, very traditional. But I think the stuff that we see is leaning more traditional now. I think for a while it was very woke. It was all about the woman being the breadwinner, independent woman. They can do all that. But I've definitely seen a shift in recent years. And I was gonna do that before. Yeah. Like I went to uni. I was gonna have the more breadwinner job. I was gonna be the breadwinner in the relationship. Like I was gonna make the decisions. Like he wasn't doing any of that. So, but I didn't want to do that. Yeah. I hated it. You started off like that, and then I didn't want to do it. Yeah. I knew that like that's not what I actually wanted to do. I mean, it would have been nice to earn money and like have a lot of money, but I didn't want to be like the sole person doing that. And I used to think that's what I wanted in a woman. I used to think that I wanted someone. I actually used to say, which sounds quite arrogant now, but I wanted to find the female version of me. Yeah. That was actually because I just felt like they would understand me, not because I think I'm the best person ever. I was like, oh, if they were the female version of me, then we'd just get it. You know, everything we were doing, it would just make sense. But now, getting older, I think that would be quite catastrophic because I've come to appreciate balance so much more and actually the other side. And I think when you begin to understand, like you said, you become one flesh and that you become one with your wife. Why would you want to become one with someone who's exactly the same as you? That's because so you're going to be 50% complete. Yeah. So you want to meet someone who completes you, who brings the side, is it the side of the coin? Fill in the circle? Who brings... Other side of, yeah. Yeah, who brings what you don't have. Yeah. Then you are a complete pair. Yeah. For example, I'm terrible with finances, but you're really good. Thank you. If I married someone who also wasn't good at finances, we'd be screwed. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a whole thing of complementing across the board, you know, your outlooks on life, your interests, you know, your abilities. You know, you want to find someone who actually matches and complements those things, not just you're good at that, I'm crap at this, you know, therefore you'll do it. You know, it's a lot more than that, because that's what actually really makes up the one. You know, you've got the two individuals and you can live individually by yourself and make all those decisions and be the banker and be the earner and be the cook and everything. You can do it by yourself. But when you have the second person with you, you know, you then start realizing, hey, I'm good at this, they're good at that, they have this desire, they have this desire, they have this vision, they have, and it's almost like finding the right person that really seriously complements you brings such a release and such a freedom, right, that things are not burdens. You operate out of your strengths, you love out of your strengths, yeah. And the things that you're not necessarily all that good at, well, the other person is a complement to that. Yeah. You know? Mm-hmm.
I think really the only other point I was saying, because I think in order to feel like I've done explaining it well, I'd probably have to do a teaching on it. But just the body analogy, when you come to these passages again with an open mind and come to them with source, origin, that approach, and looking at what the church fathers and how the early church interpreted these scriptures, they do actually make sense, because Jesus is all, you know, the body analogy. If you think about it, when you picture a body, I'm told that tête in French actually, which is head, has nothing to do with authority or boss or whatever. It's just because we've used it in that way and we've got used to it. But the picture of Jesus and the body and the head is not, it doesn't come across naturally actually like a hierarchical thing to me. It's more about unity and each part working together to build up the body. You know, we all need each other. It's very clear. So Jesus also as the physical head of a body. He is the source of all our life, the source of everything. He proceeds from the Father. You know, Eve was taken from Adam, or man was taken from woman. She proceeds from him. She comes from him. He's her source. Actually, it's a beautiful picture of unity and interdependence and working together. And I think it fits Jesus and the creation story and the principles of Christianity far more than the traditional view of, you know, we've got to be fighting over who's in charge here.
And I think when you explain to me that the word head means source, and you really start to like think about what that means, the source of the river or the source of life. Jesus is our source, and I live a life in submission to Jesus, but Jesus doesn't lord power over me. In fact, it's so, he won't force me to do anything. He won't tell me to do anything. He never says, I'm in charge and you need to do what I say. The most I've noticed, or the most he seems to say to me is, just trust me. Just trust me. That's the furthest it goes. Like, this is the direction that is best for you. I promise. Just trust me. But it's still completely up to me. He doesn't force me to do anything. And then when you start to think, even if it said that the man is the source of the woman, as I think it's referring to the rib coming out of, well, the way I interpreted it was the rib coming out of Adam, that the woman is the source.
The man is the
source of the woman because of the rib that came out. You think about, well, what does that love encompass? If Jesus is the source of us and he came down and died for us, and I'm supposed to love you the same way that Jesus loves me, you're submitted to me the same way I'm submitted to Jesus, and I can only be truly submitted to Jesus if I'm submitted to you in the same way, to the point where I would die for you on a cross. If I'm not at that place, then I'm not doing the right thing. So
exactly.
I think you really have to understand the love of Jesus before you can even begin to talk about submission or think about submission.
I agree. It's a very good point, Jordan.
Thing is, submission is actually given willingly. If you know that you are not even in a marriage relationship, you know, even in a very close friendship, right? In whatever relationship you are, if you trust that person implicitly, right, you willingly submit to them, right? They don't demand it, you give it. This is what mutual submission is about. You give and offer the submission rather than being the person that demands the submission simply because of a positional place in the relationship.
That's what I tried to say there. As soon as you're demanding submission, it's no longer about love, it's about power.
Yes,
absolutely.
You should never
and
demand.
you never ever said that to me.
Yeah.
Whereas other people have.
Just brought it up. Yeah. I think you never demand submission. It's like the action speaks louder than words thing.
Yeah.
If it's gonna happen that way, as has happened with us, it happened because it was natural, not because we ever had the talk about submission. In fact, in our marriage vows, you were like, I submit to you. I can't remember exactly what you said, but I was so taken aback when you said that.
I submit to you the way that Jesus submits to the Father as an equal and as a team member. That's what I said.
You said something else as well, didn't she?
I think you said something again,
but I
again
remember,
later, but that wasn't coming from you.
Even at that time, I think this sums it up because I was completely not expecting that. It
he
took
was
me
like,
back in the moment.
whoa.
I was like,
I remember watching
whoa,
it.
you said that? I haven't asked for that. I haven't expected you to say that. I was really shocked, but I never once brought it up, and for some reason
as in to say it,
I've not brought it up with you and been like, you need to be, only in jokes where I'm like, you're gonna have to submit to me.
In fact, I once sent you a video about this woman like kneeling down and saying she's submitted to their
she went
husband,
so
and
far.
you were like,
I was like, don't
if you
do
did that, I'd be like, get up.
Yeah, you missed it. I'm like, come on,
get up. So
it's really important, this whole understanding and this whole approach, you know, to loving and submission, relationship, husband and wife, because I think from the background that I came with, husbands were not challenged to love your wife. Wives were challenged to submit to their husbands. You know, husbands are on the winning side. You don't have to do anything and you're in charge, you know, by that definition. And I would challenge every single man, you know, whether married or not, who's actually watching something like this, to seriously think about how you view your relationships, even at work or whatever the case might be. Do you actually demand submission, or are you going to live a life where submission is given to you by choice by the other person? Because that really is a difference. That really makes a difference. If you know that I care for you, if you know that I love you, right? I am not going to do anything in a selfish way, nothing to harm you. I'm not going to make any decision that is actually going to go ahead and cause any type of harm, any type of negative, right? And only then, right, would I even think about, therefore, you can submit to me. I cannot demand it. And I would challenge men, right, who are Christians, who are in church, who are considering marriage, or maybe even in a marriage, that have you ever thought about just that? You do not demand submission from your wife, right? You live a life where she's willing to go ahead and submit to you, just as much as you will be willing to submit to your wife, because you know that she loves the hell out of you. She loves you, right? So you're able to trust her if for whatever. She's going to make the right choices. And therefore, I am willing to go ahead and give you my heart, my thoughts, my life, my vision, anything that I may actually have, because I trust you, I love you, and I give it to you.
I think submission itself is also quite a loaded word, because it's got a picture. It's quite a heavy word, isn't it? Like, I submit.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it's very
it's a bit
helpful.
of like a taboo word almost now, like, submission, you can't submit, stuff like that. It seemed quite negative.
I remember we had
like
a conversation. Sorry.
No, it's all right.
I remember we had a conversation once, but I don't remember exactly how it came about when we were dating, when you still were in England, when we were talking about if we are being filled by like God and Jesus and we're spending that time by ourselves and then we are submitting to that, then we'd serve each other. Do you know what conversation I'm talking about? Like if we are so filled with the Spirit then and love, like God's love, then we're going to love each other right and we're going to serve each other. But it's not like just me serving you and you serving me. We'd serve each other equally.
Yeah,
I think that's what I'm saying, Jessie.
That's
Words like love and service
That's the only way,
they're more helpful words, I think, just because of that word just has some negative connotations, doesn't it? Where it's all about love.
I think
and
saying,
service.
if you can think, how can I use my gifts to serve my husband or wife?
Yeah.
If you think about it that way, what are the things that I'm good at? Okay, I'm going to use these gifts to serve you and our marriage. Likewise, you do the same. And so again, we're in more of a traditional place.
Yeah.
But like my parents were not a traditional marriage. My brother probably won't be in a traditional marriage.
Yeah.
And I'm not here telling them, they've done it wrong. And they're not here telling me we've done it wrong. Because what we understand is that you need to use your gifts to serve the other person as much as possible. And looking at you, I want to encourage you to use your gifts to the best of your ability. I don't want to let my own pride or my ego get in the way and stop that. If you were brilliant at finances, better than me, then I would encourage you, take over the finances. If you were the entrepreneur and had these ideas and were just brilliant like that, you wanted to make money, you wanted to go out and work, then I would encourage that if that's the situation that we were in. Now, I will say, if you know categorically that isn't for you, like I knew that wasn't for me, I'm very busy, and I just knew that if I was with someone else who was busy and similar to me, it wouldn't work. We'd end up neglecting our relationship because we'd both be too focused on what we were doing out here.
And I didn't want a man who wasn't ambitious and like, I love all your ideas because you're always thinking of the future and the ambition, working towards that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't want to have to do that.
But you don't need to get into a situation that is traditional. If you know, think about what would work for you. First, you said it earlier, you need to self-reflect.
I think self-awareness is really important. That's the starting point. Who are you? Who are your gifts? How do you tick? What brings you life? What makes you work? And when you're looking at a partner, you're trying to find someone who's complementary to you, who's going to be able to spur you on and support you. You're going to be able to support them.
Sorry.
No, I'm not saying there's lots of tools that we've used over the years to help with that self-awareness and to understand better how we work as a team and what our gifts and skills are.
Yeah.
It wasn't until maybe around 2 years ago. I actually remember the conversation I had. It was Christmas Eve. Maybe a couple of years ago, it would have been around a couple of years ago, I think. Maybe just a year ago. I didn't know you a year ago, did I? Anyway, that is, sorry.
You're getting caught here. I was thinking he's spiralling.
Sorry. I've lost my trail of thought now.
Conversation 2 years ago, 1 year ago.
2 years
ago. 2 weeks ago.
A couple of years ago, maybe even a year ago, I didn't even know the type of person that I wanted, because it wasn't until I self-reflected and realised I wouldn't have considered you a year ago, 2 years ago, because I wouldn't have thought that you were my type. I thought I wanted someone
like you.
completely different. I thought I wanted someone who just wasn't you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I had this light bulb moment, I was like, actually, that hasn't worked for me once in my life so far. That doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
That isn't probably what's best suited to me and the direction that I'm going in life. So why would I look for that? And then it was kind of like I had the blinkers removed and it just opened up. And here I am, happily married 2 weeks, 2 days in, 2 weeks.
That's a
Happy
good sign.
life.
That's a good sign.
It is really important though, because I think someone like Jessie in current culture would be judged by a lot of women
Outside
of the church, let me
yeah.
say, who would say, anyway, I won't go into that because I don't need to, because you're lovely. Even me, when I first heard, because I've spent my life having to fight, well, no, actually I shouldn't say that,
She had to fight me her whole life. She was like,
having to research and come to the
Yeah.
point of what the truth is because of how I had been made, and going, well, God, why? Would you really be saying that if you've made me this? Because I'm not a rah kind of super rebellious, like horrible woman. I don't think. I still had quite a gentle, in some ways, submissive spirit, but Dad also said I was quite a force of nature, and now I'm losing my. Now I'm going off and losing my train of thought. But what I'm saying is, you would be judged outside of the church, and Dad inside the church was judged for being. I was wearing the trousers. I had a spirit of Jezebel. Some people would have said,
just
one
crazy.
person did say, I was rebellious. I was rebellious against God's word and rebellious against God. Now, telling someone whose heart is seeking nothing but to serve God and seeking truth and wanting to know what He really says, it's just horrendous. It's abusive.
Arrogant. It is abusive.
Yeah.
It's arrogant.
And so many women over the decades have suffered that. And when I told Ethan about that, he was like, "No, you're joking. People actually said that." I'm like, "Love, you could go and be a missionary and be sharing the gospel and the good news with people overseas, building hospitals, goodness knows what, come back and not be allowed to teach a passage from the Word of God in church because you're not allowed to teach. You can share, but you can't teach." And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? You'll send a missionary out there for years doing that, pouring their life out, and you'll use women to teach the most vulnerable people in the same church, the kids, right? This would also get me. Use women to teach all your vulnerable children who actually could be easily deceived, arguably. Yeah. But as soon as they get to 18, you're not qualified to teach them. When they're an adult and can think for themselves, then all of a sudden you're not. And irrespective of, it was like both the God's word, but also just rational thinking that kept confronting me. And I was like, are you nuts? This makes absolutely zero sense. What are you even saying? Think about it. So we've had all of that, for many years. And it was quite hard at times to walk the road that we believed was correct and expose what we felt was, graciously, I hope, wrong interpretation of the scripture. And we respect everyone who holds a different view and holds traditional views to this day. But what I do find hard to respect is when people, in disrespectful, ungracious ways, judge you and kind of force that on you.
The thing is that, you got called, Jezebel and...
who murdered the prophets,
basically, but at the same time, I was a weak man.
Clearly.
I was a weak man, who was ruled over by a woman or whatever the case might be. But
so
it's like what you're saying, with self-reflection, you assessed, who am I, right? What is my makeup? What do I like to do? What are my strengths and everything? And who's going to be the type of life partner who's actually going to be a good complement to me? I didn't really do that, right? I was coming with the approach of simply, you're the male, you'll be the husband, you'll be in charge, right? And like I said, I was hit with the force of nature with Linz, right? Because her giftings, her strengths, her talents were much more public, in a sense, than mine, right? I could teach, but I'm an introvert. I sort of stand back a little bit more. Now, I came from a background in which I was an officer in the Air Force, right? So pretty much every single signal that I received was that I was a leader. I was supposed to be, in charge, and basically, so approach the relationship with that.
And you do have leadership.
And I do have leadership skills, yes,
it's not like you don't.
in areas, but not in all areas. And I think that's the thing. I had to stand back and reassess, in a sense, become more self-aware of to who I was in relation to Linz, because I could see that she had incredible giftings as a leader, a teacher, apostolic entrepreneurial giftings, that I didn't have. And I had to ask my question, how does this fit together? right? Because I can't lead that.
Yeah.
I'm not called to lead that, and I'm not called for her to submit all those giftings to me. And I felt really uncomfortable. But come to the realization, that even though I held positions of leadership, in various roles and in the military and things like that, I don't know that I was actually ever cut out to be the number one leader. That's not what ever made me comfortable. And I think in our relationship, I think I submit to you in the area of apostolic,
The visionary side.
the visionary side, as a family, where are we going, where is God calling us to do, right? Obviously with a bit of a prophetic edge, to myself, and teaching, we complement each other well. But I'm very comfortable in these areas being the number two, submitting. I don't have to go ahead and assess and make the final decision. No, she does.
And I also just want to say, though, that when I think about the guys and women who criticised you, you showed tremendous security. You're a far stronger person than any of those guys, because it takes a great strength as a guy and as an officer and a gentleman and all the rest of it to come to that place where you are willing to support your wife and release me to be all I was called to be. And it was a delicate kind of few years initially, because I was very young and still growing. And if I hadn't had George, who was secure,
you were 18,
and willing enough to do that, I was nearly 19 when I got married. And I remember the moment, one of the most key moments for me, because I've had a lot of hurtful moments in this journey, but also some really fine, great ones. And Phil Leach, if he ever listens to this, bless Phil Leach, who leads the School of Biblical Studies in Wyram, great, humble, lovely, lovely man. And I remember the moment when they were choosing in Youth with a Mission who was going to lead the team to Albania. And I really had a desire to do it. I just wanted to do it. And I thought, well, they'll never choose me to do it, because in all my previous experience, the very most you'd get is they'd ask your dad, your George and I to lead. Never, if you were married never in a million years would a woman lead. And I remember Phil saying he felt that God was calling me to lead and he wanted me to lead. And I'm like, what? You mean the team, right? No, you. You have leadership skills. They are recognised. You lead.
When it comes to someone else as well. When it comes through someone else.
Yeah.
When someone else says it, it's like a confirmation.
Yeah,
and
it was amazing. It was so healing.
Really, really cool.
So healing and so wonderful that that
I
happened.
went off crying.
But that dad was absolutely thrilled about it. And we still, work together.
Yeah, it was a
my greatest
fantastic
support
trip.
in life.
Absolutely fantastic
That was
trip.
a real moment for me.
Yeah.
I think part of what you're saying in terms of being secure is because I think early on we understood the whole thing about headship. We understood the whole thing about submission. I wasn't intimidated by guys who automatically thought I should be carrying the vision for the family. I should be doing this. I would say to them, speak to her. And they were often taken aback because they would pull me off to the side and saying, so brother, tell me, what's your vision? And I'm like,
don't know. On Myers-Briggs, I'm an S. I'm thinking about today, to be honest. If you want to know about the future, speak to my wife.
And basically, I sort of had an enjoyment of actually rocking the boat, because I think it needs to be rocked. It needs to be rocked. Men need to be secure, right, in who they are, in the fact that they can submit to their wives as much as their wives can submit to them.
And I think the stuff that you were taught and the stuff that we've been taught, all it seems to have done is sow a lot of division. It's been there and it's created a lot of division. It has prevented a lot of togetherness. It's prevented a lot of oneness. It stops us coming together because it pits the husband against the wife, even if you don't see it that way. It puts the husband above the wife, which creates tension. It puts men against women. It took you years to figure that stuff out. Fortunately, when we were going through our engagement, we were able to speak to you about this stuff. So I don't think...
Because I was kind of like, before I met you, swaying
towards very traditional.
Oh, I have to do that.
Just resigning yourself to getting on with it and dealing with it.
To unearned submission. Yeah. But I don't see you above me at all. We're a team. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
the whole thing is about coming together in love and the focus. I think it'd be more helpful if the term submission was just forgotten about tomorrow. Stop preaching on submission. Stop talking about submission and start talking about love instead.
Yeah.
Focus on love.
Loving and
because
serving.
once you truly love, once you understand the love of Christ, and once you truly love like Christ, all these things just fall into place.
Yeah.
People, they look down the line instead of looking here. The solution is here, and people are looking at the little details over here. All this falls into place when you understand this. The focus should always be on love. The focus should always be on unity. The focus should always be on coming together.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Preach it, son.
Who would have thought, me 2 years ago saying all this stuff?
Love and freedom.
Crazy.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Freedom to be who God calls you to be, and to love with as much love as you can give, as much
Yeah,
service
that's
by
big.
God's grace that you can give. That's what it's all
Let
about.
people be who God called them to be.
Oh, yes.
And trust that God
Fully.
has them on a path as well. If they love God, it's actually quite arrogant of you to think that you can steer their path. If they're trusting God and you know that they trust God, if you know that they love God, or even if the door's open and they're walking towards God, God has got them so much more than you ever could.
That is a very good
So
point.
much more than you ever could.
That is a brilliant point.
It's arrogant to
Yeah.
think that you can fix them, or you can change them, or you can show them a truth. The Holy Spirit is the greatest disciple. If you point them back towards God over and over again, one, your actions speak louder than any words that you could give. They will see the type of person that you are, and if they have beliefs that differ to yours, eventually, if they see so much that they love in you, they're going to ask you these questions, and you will disciple them just through loving God. And every time you point them back towards God, it opens up the door for God to come in and speak truth and to show his love.
And also, I'd just like to put the challenge out there as well, because the view on this, particularly the headship thing, has caused so many problems. It's affected women's ability to be leaders in churches. It's caused whole rifts between whole denominations and all the rest of it. It's actually still huge. And I was quite shocked speaking to you and Ethan and you, Jessie, about what's out there now, still in social media. So it's not something to be ignored. We have to get this right, because there's still a whole raft of people who are being negatively affected by this, even today, which I can't believe that we're still talking about this same stuff. And it's terrible in that the church is supposed to be leading the way in love and freedom and service, and actually often, we're way behind what people are saying and doing outside the church, and it's heartbreaking. So.
Well, next episode or some point soon, we need to get on to Jesus' prayer.
Oh yeah, which I actually touched on last week in my talk on the battle of the sexes. Who wins? No one.
Well,
so
we don't know when that episode will be released exactly, Mum, but in that episode, the battle of the sexes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think discussing that together, or discussing it again, you can just keep discussing
that's
these things
true.
over and over.
Yeah, that's true.
People hear
It's
it.
really important. Yeah, it's very much a key part of who we are. So
we'll
come back to it.
Yeah.
2 weeks, 2 years.
After 2 weeks of marriage. Further down the line.
Does anyone else have anything they want to add before we finish up?
No, we'd better wrap it up.
No, yeah.
Just the Facebook community again to keep
Facebook
know.
community. We've said that a few times. There is did you mention that in your last episode?
I did, yeah.
You did, yeah. So the Facebook community has been live for a number of weeks now. It's in our Instagram bio currently. At the time of recording, it's already there. So if you click on the bio in our Instagram, there's a link there that says join our Facebook community. You can just click on that and it brings you there.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your questions and comments.
Yeah, join the community. I feel like I'm saying this every episode, but I guess it's good enough. The community, what we want to do, we've always just wanted to open up our hearts and open up our doors and really welcome people into our home, which is why the podcast is called Our Home. Now with limited physical space, you can only ever welcome in so many people. However, online that number is unlimited, so that's why we're there. So that invitation is out to everyone. I'd like to clarify, you do not need to be a Christian. We say this every time, you don't need to be Christian. We're not there to try and convert you. We just want to love. That's it. We want to love properly.
And believe that God's truths and principles are a blessing in
Exactly.
life, whoever you are.
We want to pray for people. We want to support people. We want to live in communion and fellowship with people. So that invitation into our hearts and into our home is out there for everyone. You can also follow us on Instagram and share this podcast with anyone that you feel may benefit, or share onto your stories. wherever you want to go.
Thank
So
you.
appreciate it. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. See you next week.